Whoa! Welcome to the What's Our Verdict podcast, where we fashion ourselves cinematic judge and jury. My name is JJ Crowder. I'm here with my co-host, Alec Burgess.
Let's get it.
We appreciate you tuning in. Go ahead and hit that follow, subscribe, like, bell notification buttons. Helps you keep up with all of our episodes, and it helps us grow the podcast, which we appreciate and love. Also, tell a friend about us. Tell a family member about us. Tell a rock star singer, up-and-coming singer, or, I won't go there. I was going to say something probably very inappropriate and insensitive, so I'll stop. But yeah, tell your local rock star about us. We would appreciate it. Country music star, whatever you want to say. With that, we're here in week 2 of our biopic week or month of November. Jam-packed with some pretty heavy hitters in these movies. And we're hitting you today with Walk the Line. It was released November 18th, 2005. It was written by Johnny Cash, Gil Dennis, and James Mangold. And it was directed by James Mangold. It stars Joaquin Phoenix, Reese Witherspoon, Jennifer Goodwin, Robert Patrick, Dallas Roberts, Dan John Miller, Larry Bagby, Shelby Lynn, Tyler Hilton, and Waylon Payne. A chronicle of country music legend Johnny Cash's life, from his early days on an Arkansas cotton farm to his rise to fame with Sun Records in Memphis, where he recorded alongside Elvis Presley, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Carl Perkins. This one's my pick, and I think this one's my pick because, well, it's not. This is my pick. Like, when I think about biopics, like, this was the one. I was never a huge fan of biopics when I was younger, and when a lot of these, like, we just did Catch Me If You Can, and like the fact that it was based on a true story. When I was younger, those bothered me. Like, I was like, because how much are they making up? How much is not true? But this one caught me because it was like this conflagration of all these different things that I love. So I don't love biopics, but I love Joaquin Phoenix back then. I loved Reese Witherspoon back then. I love Johnny Cash, like, still to this day. Like, want to put on some Johnny Cash? I'm in. So, like, all of these things came together for me to go, okay, I'm very interested in this movie. And I remember seeing it in the theater going, holy shit. So I was like, we have to watch this. I got to put it on the list. And thankfully Charles picked it. So appreciate it. Cholula water. Much appreciated. This movie to me, like, is the first time that I watched a biopic and went, ooh, this is very interesting. Because I didn't know a lot about Johnny Cash. I just knew that I love his music because it's different. His voice is so intriguing and so different than a lot of other things out there. So I'm glad we did this one. It was fun.
So you get your revenge, although it's nothing new. I'd never seen this before.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm still young. so I kind of avoid a lot of biopics if I know about the person beforehand. Gotcha. So, like, Catch Me If You Can, we just did that last week. The first time I was introduced to Frank Abagnale was through Catch Me If You Can movie. Then I went to go research after.
Yeah.
We're doing Walk the Line now. I'm a big fan of Johnny Cash, right? Boy Named Sue is one of the greatest songs ever written.
Yes, sir.
And so watching a movie about Johnny Cash after I have this kind of like image of him scares me.
Sure.
Because we'll see it again when we do a later one with one of our later films that we're doing this month, but no spoilers for that one. But this was someone that, I knew who Johnny Cash was. My dad had Johnny Cash going all the time growing up. Ring of Fire, Boy Named Sue, Walk the Line, everything.
Yep.
So I was nervous and apprehensive because it's like not necessarily a hero, right? But you have this mental image, build him up type of a thing. And a biopic's going to go ahead and ruin all that shit.
Absolutely.
So I was apprehensive about watching it. And even Joaquin Phoenix, I mean, the guy is amazing.
Oh yeah.
I'm surprised he didn't win an Oscar for this. I'm surprised it took all the way up to fucking Joker for him to win one.
Mm-hmm.
But I was apprehensive again because same thing. Like, this is a guy who's playing a legend. Is he gonna pull it off? And oh my gosh, did he pull it off?
Oh yeah.
And I didn't know this. I had to look it up after the fact. The dude was doing the singing in a lot of it, or not, if not all of it. Like, that's Joaquin Phoenix singing.
Yeah.
And it sounds like Johnny Cash.
Yep.
Like, it was amazing. I was shocked.
Yeah.
But this was an incredible movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I was amazed the entire time watching it.
Yeah, and I think that was like one of my biggest fears when this movie came, because I'm with you too. Like, Johnny Cash has always been, but I didn't know much about him. But I knew, like, I'm with you. I'm always worried about, are they going to ruin because I don't want to know if he was an asshole, right? Like, I don't want to know that he was a dickhead.
I don't want to know if he was a dick.
Yeah, that he was like, enough that he's had like drug addict shit and that he was an alcoholic. Like, that stuff, but you're like, I don't need to watch it. I just want to listen.
I don't want to ruin it for myself.
Yeah. So it was just crazy. And then, but what blew me away was when watching it, and to your point, when the first time you see Joaquin Phoenix, or hear him rather, because you see him up front when he's sitting in Folsom in the wood shop and he's just sitting, but he doesn't talk, except he says, like, he just kind of looks at the guy. But then when it comes back around, then you go to his childhood. When it comes back around and he's at home and he's getting ready to leave for the Navy, like, or the Air, which is Navy,
Air
right?
Force.
Yeah, Air Force. Sorry. Yeah, Air Force. So in that moment when he first talks, I'm like, oh shit, what the fuck? Because I'm used to like Gladiator Joaquin Phoenix, where he's like kind of a whiny little bitch, and I'm like, geez. But then he talks and I'm like, oh my God, he sounds just like him. And then he starts singing and I'm like, oh my God, how did he pull that off? And then to take it one step further, you have Reese Witherspoon, who also sang all of her parts in this. And if you play her and June Carter side by, you fucking wouldn't know.
Yeah.
Like, her talking is a little more, like, you can tell, because June Carter had a little higher pitched voice than Reese Witherspoon. Reese Witherspoon was able to pull off in speaking because she was always so in character. But as a singer, like, holy shit, dude. Like, every time I listen, I'm like, did they dub her? Because but they didn't. They just worked that well to sound like those characters. And then the mannerisms, the other piece that got me with Joaquin Phoenix is like the mannerisms. So like the lifting of the guitar, the pointing it like a rifle, like all of those. When he's on stage, Johnny Cash was a different human being than when he wasn't. Like, and Joaquin Phoenix pulls that off to the point that I'm with you. It absolutely flabbergasted me that he did not win the Oscar for it. Like, it did not make sense to me that he didn't.
Yeah, because it's a hard thing to emulate, like you were saying with the whole pulling up the guitar. Like, Johnny Cash was more of a sing speaker, right? Like, he was talking and telling a story while singing, and it was instrument of storytelling was his guitar.
Yeah.
And to throw that in there, like, while you're trying to act, to be able to do all the weird kind of crazy, quirky things that Johnny Cash was able to do. Come on. Leave some talent for everybody else, Joaquin.
No shit. And I love Joaquin Phoenix. I just think there was a phase where I'm like, oh God, is he okay?
Yeah.
Because he does go through a phase where you're like,
yeah, this doesn't make any sense. This is not.
Yeah.
The other thing, or like one of my favorite scenes, right, was when I can't remember exactly what, but when there was Sam Phillips, right? Who's the actor who plays Sam Phillips? Dawson.
Dallas Roberts.
Dallas Roberts.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Like, that was an amazing scene where he's pretty much like, yeah, gospel's out.
Yeah.
No thanks.
Yeah.
I can't sell it. I can't market this. And then you have this kind of really cool interaction where Johnny Cash, like, what are you saying? I don't believe in God. He's like, no, you don't believe in yourself.
Yeah.
Like, that's the problem. You don't believe in yourself. And then you have this really cool moment where he's like, hey, I actually wrote something in the Air Force. Okay. Wow me.
Yeah.
And then it's it's a great song about Folsom Prison. And I was like, oh, dude, that is cool. And I really hope that interaction, because Johnny Cash was, someone who wrote it. Like, I hope that's what actually happened, to where Sam Phillips essentially said, hey, dude, you suck.
Yeah.
Like, but I think you can be good, but you don't think you can be good.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of times what people need to hear. And I think that's where we kind of moved away from stuff. And, we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. But no, dude, if you want to be good, you have to have someone tell you that you suck.
Yep. Well, and to go even a step further with what you're saying, this was a time in music where music was changing. And we're kind of in a, let me rephrase this, because I don't want to fucking try to compare what we're going through now to what they were doing in music back then, because, and I think we've talked about this, like I have such a disdain for most music today. Mm-hmm. And the reason that I do is because of what we're seeing, what we see there with Johnny Cash. Johnny Cash and his band were playing gospel music because that's what they grew up with. That's what was popular and famous, and what would drive you to be successful as a music artist, especially a country artist back then. So everybody, and this is true for most forms of art, you have someone that creates it or innovates something, and then people bite it, right? They go, okay, well, I want in on that. I can do that. And then they mimic it, or they recreate it, or they do their own version of it. And they use that to build their own fame, which I get. You do what you got to do. And if it works and we figure it out and we let people get away with it, we do it. But we see this shift from, because at the same time, and we see it in this movie, is Johnny Cash, we have Jerry Lee Lewis, we have Elvis Presley, we have all these people that are reinventing rock music and what music was back then, shifting from the 40s and 50s, like
Hank Williams.
Everything's shifting to this more upbeat, darker lyrically, or you know what I mean, things like that. And Johnny Cash was right at the forefront of this, especially like the heavy lyric stuff, where you're talking about real life shift, and it's not just talking about falling in love and Jesus and all that stuff that was going on back then. So I love that. And then you see a lot of people try to recreate what Johnny Cash does moving forward from there. And the same with Elvis and Jerry Lee Lewis, even though all of them had their moments of being real pieces of shit. But they reinvented and they really moved music forward for a lot of decades, until, again, probably in the 70s and 80s, we start to see another shift to a different kind. And then the 90s, grunge or whatever. But we haven't had one of these musical renaissances in a while, in my opinion. I'm sure there's a lot of people that don't agree with that, especially younger generation. But like, we hit the late 90s, and I'm like, I don't know that we've had a shift in music like we had in previous decades since the early 90s.
Yeah, not really, because it's become so broad.
I guess, and everybody does exactly what's working in the moment, right?
There's a lot of copycat shit. You have Taylor Swift, who came up as country artist. Yeah, like, that's what Taylor Swift did, and then she grew into pop and everything like that. And now she's probably the biggest, after her Eras tour nonsense that went out, a huge star.
Sure.
Right, but it's not like she was at the forefront of this change, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
It was, hey, country music sells because you look like a country girl. And it was, hey, you're dropping on records, we're going to move you into pop.
Yep.
We're going to change your image almost. So it's kind of like changing the artists to fit what's going to work, instead of the artist changing the music for them.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. And it's fun to watch in this movie, that shift and that change. And then to your point, that scene specifically, where it's like you're not going to get away with doing what everybody else has done up to this point. And then in that moment, watching Cash go, and I'm with you, I hope that there was some level of realism to that scene, and the fact that Johnny Cash was so involved in this movie makes me feel like there's some level of accuracy to some of these scenes that you're like, man, I hope it was real, because that moment is such a powerful shift from, I just want to have a band that works, so we're going to play what we know has worked before, to, you can't do that shit anymore. Be yourself, figure it out. And then to watch him go, well, this shit's working. You know what I mean? The other piece that I love about this too, that when it comes to Johnny Cash, is I always looked at Johnny Cash as this sad or intense, or I love the moments where things are working and he's talking to like his wife and he gets all excited, man, and he starts joking and he's funny and the interactions with June really are a lot too, because like he has these moments where you just see him be really funny and really lighthearted, and that's just not the character that he portrayed as a singer. So I've always been very intrigued, especially when he was alive, like watching old interviews with him, like you can see there's a little twinkle in that dude's eye when he wasn't shit ripped or high, you know, in his younger interviews, but like as he was older and he'd gotten sober and he'd gotten, you know, he'd settled down with June, and like you can see that there was some humor in that dude, even though he lived a very tough life.
Mm-hmm. But that was the kind of thing that's also, he kept it close to the chest, right?
Yeah.
Like he kept this humor side of him close to the chest. He was the kind of broody, you know, suffering, starving artist type of on the outside. But, you know, when things were going right, you got to see that kind of come out a little bit.
Yep.
And that was kind of cool to see as well. And once again, props to Joaquin Phoenix for being able to pull it off.
Yeah.
Like, I swear.
Yeah.
It's almost like I hate the guy, right?
Yeah.
But not really, because why are you like this? Why are you this good?
Yeah. Well, and I've always like, yeah, he's just so good. But I think to me, and a lot of people would say Joker, but I didn't love Joker. I know that's again, don't fucking at me, people, but like, I just
didn't. You're just on a roll this last couple.
I know. Don't get me wrong. Like, I love Joaquin Phoenix in Joker. I love, why can't Robert? Why?
Robert Pattinson?
I want to call Bob. I want to call him Bob. The guy that played Murray in Joker. Why can't I? Jesus H. Christ. Anyway, you're gonna see who it is and be like, "What the fuck, JJ? You call yourself a movie podcaster?" Anyway, I love the actors in Joker. I just didn't love I know, right? I told you.
Robert De Niro.
And here's what threw me off, dude. It's because like all of his co-stars call him Bob. And for some reason, all I could fucking hear in my head was Bob. And then I'm like, that's not his name.
Anyway. I have an excuse. I haven't seen Joker.
Fuck. Oh, yeah. I don't. Yeah. It's weird.
Oh, that was good.
But yeah, but Joaquin Phoenix is amazing in Joker. I just don't like that it's Joker. Like, if you would have just called this anything else and had it be about this guy, but we should do that movie at some point. But Joaquin Phoenix is just an outrageous actor. To your point, like, it's frustrating how much talent he has, and I think that's why I got mad during his like meltdown phase, because I was like, fuck, I feel bad for the dude because he's obviously going through some shit, and he had a hard childhood, like with River and everything else that happened with his family. And so, I mean, the guy's had a tough life, but so it's not me judging the fact that he had some, you know, issues and things that he had to step away from acting for. But like, man, he's so good. He's so good at what he does. And to me, this is peak Joaquin Phoenix. Like, I cannot take my eyes off of him when he's on the screen in this movie, which is crazy considering all the people that he's in this movie with. Like, Reese Witherspoon is no hack. She can fucking act. She's great. And Jennifer Goodwin is no hack. Robert Patrick is one of the most underrated actors, in my opinion, of our generation. And he outshines them all in every scene that he's in. The only one that really gives him a run for his money is Reese Witherspoon. When they're acting together, holy shit. They couldn't have picked a better duo to play those two, because, man, talk about one of your all-time great love stories that's really ugly and hard to, like, when you read, because the movie does a lot of justice to the story of the two of them. But when you read about all, like, the shit that they went through to get together, and like the people they hurt to get together, and like, it's not a pretty relationship. But once they were together, they were far better. Once they just were like, let's just figure this shit out, right? Like, which they also portray very well in this movie. In that moment where he's finally getting sober, and she comes through and says, "We're fucking done with this shit. Like, we're locking you in this room." They run off the fucking dealer. You know what I mean? Like, that's one of my favorite moments of this movie too, is like that piece of, as bad as June was for him up until that moment, without her in that moment, I don't know that Johnny Cash lives till he's 80 years old. You know what I mean? So it's yeah, it's one of those things where it's just as bad as that relationship probably was for most of their knowing each other, at least the early on when they were touring and things like that. I don't know that either of them would have ever been happy or in a good place without coming together. So it's just an interesting love story. And I've read a lot about the two of them because again, that's the one place with Johnny Cash that I don't know, I haven't read a lot about him, but I read a lot about their story because my grandmother was obsessed with June Carter Cash. Like I remember being a little child running around my grandma's house with the Carter family house, songs playing in June. So I was always really interested by it. And she was always my grandma did not like Johnny Cash because my grandmother was this wholesome Mormon woman that like this guy stole this woman, like caused a bunch of problems for their family. Like, so for her, she blamed all this shit on Johnny Cash, but because she loved June Carter. So it was always really intriguing to me. But I love Johnny Cash's music. Like his voice is just, you can hear him and go, oh, that's fucking Johnny Cash.
Yeah. You can't mistake him for anybody.
Yeah. And I didn't realize, one thing I didn't know that this movie pointed out to me is like that early on where his brother Jack dies. And then like growing up like with his alcoholic father, who was obviously a product of the time and the situation. But I don't think I knew before this movie, like how difficult his childhood was.
Yeah.
And that pushed him into the Air Force and the military just to get away from everything. And that his dad blamed him for Jack. And like, it's just fucking what a mess. So I found that interaction. And again, to, the casting credit, Robert Patrick and him acting against each other was great to watch too. Just so much great acting in this movie. It blows me away. So, yeah.
100% agree. The other thing that I really liked is like it takes a different spin, I guess, from the music that I grew up listening to, and you get to see the roots of it. Like Johnny Cash was really good at relating to whoever he was performing for, or to kind of like the down on your luck type people. But you wouldn't necessarily know that if you just listened to his music, and at face value. And I think he did it better than pretty much anybody else. Like you could say maybe Elvis, but Elvis was more kind of the everyday, individual. Johnny Cash was for the people who were down on their luck, right? You look at Folsom Prison Blues and like playing a concert in Folsom Prison Blues. And, he's on the inmate side.
Yeah.
In this film, like 100%.
Oh, yeah.
Like, this one's for your warden type of thing. And you could see how he relates to people who are down their luck. And it probably comes from the fact that he had a shitty life.
Yeah.
But instead of taking this fame or, his start of his fame and kind of saying, okay, fuck you, I'll buy, I got I'm up in my ivory tower now. He kind of stuck down on the nitty gritty. And that's where a lot of his music kind of comes from. So I really like that. And I like how they portrayed it.
Yeah, I agree. And it has one of the greatest, like, you think they forgot?
Yeah.
Like that line to me, I'm like, get him. Like, because that to me, and exactly to your point, like it takes someone that understands that when people are in a situation like that, they know exactly the situation that they're in. There's no going into a prison to do a concert and thinking that you're fucking changing their circumstance or their outlook of that circumstance. You're just providing them with entertainment and something that is different from their everyday grind. That doesn't mean that all of a sudden they think they're not in prison. You know what I mean? Or the fact that you're there is going to make the fact that they're in prison better. You're just making that day better, right? Like, and so I loved, like, to me, that was the moment that I'm like, oh shit, get them. And I'm sure that's very true, right? And if you've ever listened to one of the greatest, in my opinion, if not the greatest live album ever, it's up there in the top 5, top 10 minimum of being live from Folsom Prison. Like, that album is outrageously good. And he says shit like, you hear this one's for your warden. And you can just tell that I guarantee every warden, every guard in there is going, this motherfucker.
Yeah.
Like,
100%.
But I love it.
Yeah. And it's even the, kind of right at the beginning where he's talking, he's like, now I haven't done any hard time like you guys, but I've been locked up a time or two type of a thing. So it's like, I know that I can't really relate to you guys on the same level, but I kind of understand what it's like, and what this is all about.
Yeah.
And this is what this show is going to be. It's not going to be necessarily bright lights and, all this kind of fluff, I guess. It's going to be, hey, we're going to have some fun. And we're going to have some fun at the expense of the warden, the guards, and, everybody else who's kind of keeping you down type of a thing.
Yep. Well, and that's, I think, one of the things that I love the most about Johnny Cash in general, and watching like interviews later in life and things like that. And the guy just gets it of like being a human being and not just necessarily having a hard life, or even if you had a great life, you know what I mean? But he just understands human nature, and that not everything is sunshine and roses. Even though the guy had money, he was successful, you know what I mean? And successful in spite of addiction, and in spite of his upbringing, and in spite of all these things that were working against him, and that he fell short of working through on his own, but he did finally get through them with help, which is great. But he was never one, if you watch him, like he was never one that let fame. There were moments with Elvis, especially when he was in the movies and things like that, where you're like, okay, this guy's famous, and you can see that he's famous and he's living that life, and good for him. Good for anybody that's famous. You live that life, good on you. You've earned it. You've made your way there. I know it's not, you don't just overnight become successful in the entertainment industry. Typically, it's a lot of work and a lot of shitty other jobs and working. So there's a lot to that. However, Johnny Cash is always one that no matter how much money he made, how much success he had, you never looked at him and went, here's this big fucking star, right? This wealthy, like he was just always so grounded and down to earth, at least in my experience watching him and listening to him and reading interviews, things like that. Like it never got to his head. And I think that again comes from where he came from and the shit that he had been through. And I'm sure there were moments where he's like, I'm fucking famous, right? Like, because I'm sure he had moments with his wife where he's like, you know what? At least his first wife, where he's like, fuck off. I gave you all this shit, right?
Yeah.
You see that. But at the same time, like you don't have these moments where you're like, oh, Johnny Cash was a dick because he was famous. Johnny Cash was a dick because he was a dick.
Yeah.
And
fame didn't matter.
Yeah, he was going to be an asshole across the board, whether he just was a rich asshole instead of, or a well-known dick instead of just this guy that was an asshole across, no matter what. So I find it very intriguing. And it's one of the things that I like a lot about Johnny Cash, along with the fact that he writes great music. Hurt, and later in life, like the song Hurt is one of my, oh my God, it's so good. And I like his version better than the original, obviously. Like 9 Inch Nails, I love 9 Inch Nails. Trent Reznor's a genius. But listening to that song with Johnny Cash's voice and that just acoustic, oh my God, it's so good. The guy can he can transform music with that voice and the emotion that he puts in his voice, like in his tone and in the songs. I think that's what one of the things, going back to, we keep talking about Joaquin Phoenix, but like, that's not an easy thing to replicate, is the emotion that Johnny Cash, because even when he's singing like any song, like his upbeat shit, like they gave him a lot of hard time. And we hear, even June go, man, you guys play fast. He's like, we'd play faster if we could. But like, there's always a lot of emotion, and the way that he portrays that through his voice and his actions, like to recreate that is insane.
It's ridiculous.
This movie does. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it is what Joaquin Phoenix did should not have been able to be done.
Yeah.
Like, it shouldn't have happened.
No.
I think we're lucky that Joaquin Phoenix happened to be around at the time that they're making this biopic, because nobody else is doing it.
No.
Not at this time. Not anytime, I don't think. Yeah. It is a very, hard voice to recreate, and then you're talking about the emotion thrown in there.
Yeah.
And then the style of singing and everything. It sounds like Johnny Cash. Joaquin Phoenix sounds like Johnny Cash, and that is phenomenal.
Yep.
Because in 60 years, nobody else has sounded like Johnny Cash.
Nope. Nope. Well, and to go even a step further, a lot of actors have tried to recreate what he's done. Not with Johnny Cash, but like we just had the Elvis. And don't get me wrong, the dude that did Elvis, that he was amazing. But you can still tell he's somebody playing Elvis.
Yeah.
And we had like, what was the one with
Elton John, Taron Egerton.
Yeah, Taron Egerton. And I think the only one that came close, I will give, but he didn't sing, was the one with Queen.
Ah, yes.
He did great playing the part, but he didn't sing. Because, I mean,
you can't. I mean, they knew. Mercury, they knew it wasn't going to happen.
Let's not go there, right? But because again, that's another testament to, and again, I think Johnny Cash's voice, that lower register is easier. Quote, I'm air quoting if you're listening to us, easier, because it's not. But the other one, like he was close, I think, to catching, but again, he didn't sing. The other one that was like a lot of people talk about with recreating scene was Jamie Foxx doing oh God, the blind guy, the piano, Ray. When he did Ray. That's the name of the movie is Ray, but I can't think of his last name. Anyway,
Stevenson?
No, that's an actor from Star Wars and other things. That's the guy we just watched in Ahsoka.
It's gonna bug me.
Yeah,
Not Ray Lewis. That's football.
Yeah, Ray Lewis.
Stevie Wonder, right?
No, he is blind too. Ray. Wow, my God, you can at me for this one. Call me a piece of shit because I should remember this dude's name. Ray. Oh my God.
Ray Charles.
Ray Charles. Fuck. Sorry, Charles. That's an epic fail because we have
too much time off.
Jesus. Yeah, Ray Charles. Jamie Foxx is probably the closest to me in Ray Charles because he sang and he sounds just like Ray Charles. The difference is for me personally, like if you were to put the performances on par, they're probably very similar. But I don't have the same buy-in for Ray Charles as I do for Johnny Cash, so that's a me problem. But that's the only other one that I can think of when it comes to these biopics and biopic, or whatever you want to call them, that he comes close to what I think Joaquin Phoenix did with this movie. Okay, so I have to bitch about one thing.
Okay.
Is as much as I love this movie, and I've watched it a few times, and I'm willing to watch it almost anytime, anywhere, it is a little long.
I concur.
And the crazy piece about it is it does a great job of skipping time. It's just there's this section in the middle that I'm like, okay, I don't need to watch another concert. Okay, I don't need to watch another fight between him and either Liv or him and June. Like, I've seen it. You've established this pattern.
Yeah.
I don't need to see it another 6 times. So that's my only, I think you could have edited out a couple of scenes in the middle that would have moved this movie along a little bit more. The beginning, the end are some of the greatest movie. I love watching them. In the middle, it's a little rough. It does drag a little bit for me because it's long. But that's my only bitch. Like, so I'm nitpicking at this point. But I didn't want to let that fact go that there are moments where it drags because we see the same things over and over, which are important for his life, not necessarily for the movie because you established the pattern. So
yeah, I'd agree. And it seems almost like that seems to be a regular problem with biopics.
Yes.
Is that they have this great intro, great outro, but in the middle it drags a little bit. And especially with this one, the one we did last week, Catch Me If You Can, you have this section in the middle that you can cut out to make it better as a movie.
Yeah.
But you run into the issue of, a little bit, I say it's an issue, it's not really an issue, but the people who are the movie's being made about are involved in the writing process.
Mm-hmm.
And so they want to they're like, hey, this has to be in there type of a thing.
Yeah.
And so you have that kind of contrast with what's coming up for us the next couple weeks. We don't really see that.
Yeah.
The people who were involved in those weren't around when they were.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, and to your point, like I get it. Like the people making the movie, are like, well, that's a big swing point in their life, or this is what defined them. And I'm like, sure, but it doesn't translate to the screen.
Yeah.
And that's the part that you have to pay. I think the people that are making some of these biopics, and I'm with you, it's true in most of them. There's things that I'm like, I get why this is here from a story perspective and from a background perspective and an impact perspective in their life. But from a movie watching perspective, this doesn't change anything. And so for me, it's like an edit yourself, like edit for movies. I love the way that you said that, for a movie, not for the story. I'll go, if you do a good enough job in this movie, I'm gonna go research
it. Yeah.
And I'm gonna find out more about that moment in their life in a way that's impactful. Whereas now to me, you've created it almost to be a detriment, because I'm like, man, that's a rough part of their life. And I can't believe that actually happened to them. But I already knew that because we've watched this 6 times already. So I think if I had a criticism, that would be it. But it's such a small criticism because I get over it really quickly with this movie, especially like when we come back finally to the fulsome piece. And, you know, we've come full circle with Johnny getting clean, and he's moving on to understanding who he is now and who his fan base and how he can make an impact. I'm able to forget really quickly that I've watched a lot of shit that I just don't care as much about or is not as impactful as a movie, because it's so good at the end when you're like, yeah, it's Johnny.
Yeah.
So I like it. You want to rate it?
Let's do it.
Okay, I'll go first. It's my movie. Man, this one's so hard for me because I want to give it a 5. But I don't know if it's there because of that middle section. My biases is what making me want to give it a 5, because I can forgive the little bit of stuff in there that I'm like, doesn't need to be there. So I'm going to give it a 4.5 with the caveat that for me, this is a 5. I just don't think from a podcast perspective, I can fairly give it a 5 and feel comfortable with it, because I do have some issues that those that aren't fully in love with Johnny Cash and June Carter Cash and their story and that whole element of what's going on and like the acting, like I don't think I can look at someone and say, you're going to think this is the greatest movie ever made. Whereas for me, I'm like, this is fully entertaining at all times. So I'm going to give it a 4.5 for perspective of the podcast. It's the first time I've put a caveat like that on a movie, but I have to for this one, because like I said, I'll watch this movie anytime, anywhere, because the acting is so good, the story's so good, the content is so good. And I think Johnny Cash as a person and even June Carter Cash, they were so intriguing as human beings and as famous people, and so different than most famous musicians or anything that you see. It's very fun to watch their story, and it's very interesting to see how they became who they were. And at the end, I mean, look, they passed away very close to each other. Like, these were people that once they were together, there was nothing going to stop what was going on. And we see that in this movie, how they got there. So I love that about this movie. Yeah, it's great. The acting is unparalleled. Like, kudos to Joaquin Phoenix again for just recreating Johnny Cash on the screen to the level that I don't think other than Johnny Cash himself anyone could have done. So, and the same for Reese Witherspoon. Those two really stand out in this movie. Kudos to her for winning the Oscar for it. I think as much as I love Philip Seymour Hoffman, and another movie that I almost put on this list for Capote won the Oscar that year, I think it could have gone to Joaquin Phoenix, and it would have just been as deserved as that the Capote winning it for Philip Seymour Hoffman. So there it is, 4.5 for me. Definitely will watch this movie again.
Yeah, so I'm gonna be right there with you, 4.5. I think for me that middle part hit a little bit harder because I came in with the expectation of almost like walls up, right? Mm-hmm. Hey, Johnny Cash, don't ruin Johnny Cash for me thing. And Joaquin Phoenix, I was sold, right? Almost me that I was sold. I was like, okay. And then so now I'm in, right? And I'm all in. And then you kind of get pulled out in that middle section where it does have this repetitive kind of going around the place again. But then it comes back and it hits you hard again. Mm-hmm. So 4.5 for me. I will watch it again. I don't really enjoy biopics or biopics. I love this. Is gonna be the new running joke. Which
I
one
know.
is that so much that it's like an everyday watch, because this is something that, especially this one, that you have to like sit down and pay attention to.
Yeah.
Whereas, I can throw on Johnny Cash music and go about my day and be completely fine.
Mm-hmm.
But I think to kind of mimic what you were saying, like this story is really, really cool. And Johnny Cash as a person was a perfect person to do a biopic about.
Yeah.
100%. So I will be watching again. 4.5 for me. I don't think it, blemishes the movie in any way. It is a phenomenal watch. Go watch it. But yeah, I'm glad that this was a first time viewing.
Yeah, me too.
I love it.
2 in 2 weeks for one of us. That's crazy. Yeah. I love it. Are there any more this month, like without giving away what they are?
Yeah, there's one more.
Okay. I was going to say, because one of the next ones I had seen, I'd seen both, but like I was curious if one of them, if you had seen
one of them I hadn't seen, and for the same reason that I hadn't seen this one.
Sure. And I would probably have been in the same boat as you, except for Casey absolutely is obsessed, and so she's like, I have to. So that's how I ended up watching, because I hadn't until I met Casey, and then she was like, we're watching this. So anyway, I think that'll be week 4 of this month, but we'll see. Because I think I'm trying to alternate your picks and mine. So anyway, everybody's like, fucking stop it. But hopefully you're intrigued and you want to see which movies we're talking about. And with that, Alec, tell everybody where they can find us if they want to know what else we've listened to and reviewed.
Happy to, JJ. So November biopic month is getting week 2 down with JJ's pick, Walk the Line. This movie surprised me. I'll be saying, took a few turns that I wasn't expecting, but I really hated it and loved it at the same time. It was great. So huge thank you to our current patron, Cholula Water, for selecting this month's theme, biopics, and for the movies that are involved in said biopic theme. You, sir, are single-handedly keeping us in business. Appreciate it. If you like the content and want to get involved in the selections process for future months like our biopic month, Patreon is a place to do so, so check it out there. I can't remember what the other topics are coming up, but they're going to be pretty good, almost as good as biopics. With that, I will kick it back to Jack Dunn's baby, the Wazir of Whack, a JJ.
That's right. Thanks, buddy. Yeah, lots coming. Big topics coming. Yeah, I'm getting ready to put those on to get voted on. So we'll have a full list of what's coming soon. So looking forward to it. Yeah, what a fun movie to watch and talk about. It was great. I know maybe fun's the wrong word, but what a great movie to watch and talk about. So with that, as always, we appreciate you tuning in. We'll catch you on the next one.
Hasta la vista, baby.
Cinemagic out.
Whoa!